Yeah, what's up Internet, Since Media here, and you'll see that we are back in pure data, or the per data version of it that I like to use in Windows. And I haven't been here for over a year now, I think, since I did those last long tutorials, and I've wanted to get back into doing some pure data, but hadn't got around to it. So I thought I'd just get back in with a short video on something that actually confuses me a bit. It's something that whenever I sit down to do it, I have to look it up because I can get confused and forget how to do it, or it doesn't look right, and I'll explain why in a second. And it's partly a kind of slightly more conceptual issue that somehow I don't quite know what I want, and so I'll explain that as well. And it's to do with reusing, making subpatches or turning some of what you're doing in pure data into a sort of subcomponent that could be reused as part of a larger thing. So maybe an oscillator that you might have several copies of in a larger synthesizer. So let's just start by making the really simplest thing we can. Okay, I'm going to put in a horizontal slider. This is going to represent our pitch, so I'm going to make it somewhere between 0 and 1000 hertz. Apply that, okay it. I'm going to add an oscillator to it. That's like a sine wave oscillator, simplest oscillator. I'm going to add a multiply an audio frequency, that's so we can control the volume of it, and then I'm going to send it out of the DAC, the digital analog converter. Okay, so that's pitch, that's controlling the oscillator. Oscillator is going to be multiplied by volume, so we need the volume as well. Another horizontal slider for that, and I will make that one between 0 and 1. So simplest thing you can imagine. Space those out slightly, make it a bit bigger. Okay, how does it sound? So imagine we've made a voice like this, and now we would like to reuse it. Perhaps we want to have several voices. Now, this is a silly example, but because it's such a simple thing. But if you remember what I did in my previous video, then I would do something like this. I would draw around this, highlight the parts that are going to be reused, and then I'd say edit, encapsulate, and now let's say I'm going to call this subpatch. I'm going to call it subpatch 1, and I'm just going to save this whole thing as new subpatch examples PD. Right, now I've encapsulated that. It still works the same way. But if you look in here, it's done what it's done. It's taken those the part that does the real work. It's now created two inlets that represent the two inputs that were going into the section that has been abstracted away from. Okay, those are going to represent the frequency and the volume. That goes into the frequency input of this, and that goes into the volume there. And the output now comes out of the outlet, and you'll see it's an outlet at audio frequency. So we've successfully created a subpatch, and of course we could have another subpatch here. So I'll put that over there, I'll put that over there. And of course I now need some controls for this as well. So let me just hook the outputs to the DAC there, and I can just copy this again, put those up here, connect that to that. Oh no, that's wrong. Connect that to that one. So two pitches, two volumes, one for each oscillator. And a two voice synthesizer. Okay, so instinctively that's what I would do. when I do this. And that's partly because, you know, I come from sort of software development background, and it seems quite natural to me to, when I make my abstractions, is to not include the user interface as part of those, to keep the bit that does the work separate from the UI. And that's what I did in my tutorial last year. But actually, that's not what I see most people doing when they do something like this. So let's just go back from before we made that abstraction. And now this is what most people are going to do, right? Most people are going to do it a little bit more like this. They're going to make the selection of their bit that does the work here, the oscillator and the volume. They're going to put the controls, the UI, into that as well, and they're going to make an encapsulation of that, and we're going to call that subpatch with sliders 1. And now, okay, well, you can't hear anything, but if you open this up, the sliders are inside the subpatch. Well, by itself, perhaps that's not very useful. But now Pure Data has got a facility that we can now export the user interface to the owning patch. So let's have a look at how we do that. We can, the thing we've drawn this on is called the canvas. And if you right click on the canvas, not any component, but the background, and choose properties, it'll tell you it's the canvas properties here. And the important thing is this graph on parent. So if you click that and apply that, it creates you a kind of box. So let's okay that. And the box is this thing here. Now, on ordinary Pure Data, the way you manipulate this box is a little bit more primitive. I think you have to kind of type some numbers into its properties. But the per data version here is a little bit more convenient. You've got this little red box square there. You can drag around this, and what you're doing is you're defining the area of the canvas that's going to be exported or visible to the parent or the thing that's going to own a copy of this. So, and you'll see that actually that is reflected over here on this one. If I change the size of this, it changes on the parent. Now, something that confused me terribly, and in fact confuses me every time I come back to it and haven't remembered, is why this just looks like a grey box. And I'm like, what am I doing wrong? Well, I'm not doing anything wrong. In fact, it's just because as long as this subpatch window is open, that's going to look like a grey box. So I'm going to just close that window now, and you'll see that box now has those things. So if you just clean that up here, now you'll see the subcomponent it's PD subpatch with sliders, but it's got the sliders in it. So now we've encapsulated it all. And if I were to just copy that whole component, then of course the UI comes with it, and we can connect that up here, and we can connect that up here. So again, we have our two oscillator synthesizer here, and this time we didn't have to make the UI part separately. You know, we've encapsulated the user interface itself as part of the subcomponent, and in practice that seems to work okay. And so if you watch videos of other people using Pure Data, most of them are going to do this, and I guess perhaps we should. I mean, the lesson of this video is really that sometimes my intuitions are a bit messed up. It sort of feels wrong to me to do this, But that could just be because, you know, I'm so used to this idea of, oh, you must keep your user interface separate from everything else. But in one sense, these synthesizers, they're all user interface, right? They're all just generating audio type signals, or not. Or maybe, you know, if you start working with a more complex patch, you still might do some sensible splitting off of the UI from the logic, for example. But in this case, honestly, the more I think about it, the more I think that doing it this way, encapsulating the UI together with the subpatch and using that graph on parent facility of course you don't want this to clip, so you've got to keep the volumes down now. But that's it really, that's all I wanted to show you. That's got me back into looking at this. Actually it helps me to overcome this thing that always confuses me. And I think, yeah, there will be some more Pure Data videos soon, and we will explore some of the other fun, complicated things you can do without writing code in text form, but just wiring together these diagrams. So thanks for watching, and I will be back with something else soon. Synth Media, and I'm out.